Aha! Oh, hold on, let me readjust you a little lower. Is that? There we go. Now you guys have done unleaned. So a very popular suggestion the last couple of days has been the young man, SCP Animated. Make sure you guys keep your suggestions coming. Update them for me. DM me if I haven't gotten to anything. There are a couple of vids. I've already let you guys know who you are, where I'm having trouble getting the videos up or the videos aren't coming out yet. And YouTube's automated system has flagged a couple of things as horror, and they're not allowing them on YouTube because of COVID-19 and stuff. There's only been one person that I have talked to specifically. I'm not gonna let that hold me back because the rest of you guys have been very understanding throughout this other time. And please update your Patreon information. I talked to a couple of you guys that were not like offended, but weren't really open about deleting your Patreon subscription, which means a lot to me. But you know, I know a lot of people aren't really working as much. Skitten is still laid off. That hasn't changed. Vegas is still. We are now in we just heard from the governor, there is no end date officially now for our quarantine. But go down to $1. You know, that would make me a lot more comfortable. We've had two very, very gracious donations from some people privately to help us get through this time. So we're great. But the Patreon will remain open for those who can still support us, because Skitten being laid off is kind of a big blow to us. But we're doing well. We're in a really good place. You know, it's always kind of hard to, it's not just month to month. We're good for the next couple of months though, so we're not worried. We're staying relaxed. But make sure you guys update that information. That would make me a lot more comfortable. I've seen a lot of people not update them, and some other people are not even getting back to me in the messages, so do that. But anyways, the young man, SCP Animated, let's get into it.
Nobody could like Corporal Lawrence. That's not to say that nobody tried or that he was somehow unfriendly. Merely that he was one of those few that seemed to be wired differently. However, in the trenches of World War I, normalcy was at best a relative term. Lawrence fought, listened to orders, and didn't disrupt the other soldiers, and that was all that was required. So what if the people felt increasingly uncomfortable around him, in a place where the baseline of concern was the flesh rotting off your bones while you were still alive? A little personality conflict ranked several levels below a paper cut.
Right.
Lawrence, for his part, dealt with it as he always had, that is to say, remained totally unaware of the avoidance. The same way a man blind from birth cannot mourn the memory of color, Corporal Lawrence couldn't bemoan a lack of company. He was quiet, as he had nobody to talk to, and still, as he had nothing to do for long stretches of time. The enemy trench, less than a mile away, had gone silent for several days. This amplified the unease that seemed to radiate off of Lawrence like heat waves. The worst part was that there was no distinct reason to dislike the corporal. He was a plain man, average height, average build, bland of voice and action. Nobody could recall him raising his voice in joy or anger. He did have the occasional odd mannerisms, however. He tended to stare a beat or two longer than was acceptable at people. He rarely slept as well, and bunkmates said he would mumble in his sleep almost constantly. The content of those nocturnal ramblings, when they could be understood, were often odd and potentially unsettling. One private moved to another barracks when he heard the name of his daughter pass Corporal Lawrence's lips, followed by a bubbling, muffled giggle. It was strongly theorized that he was sent over the trench by his commanders more out of a desire to have him away than for his minimal combat skill. He and 14 of his fellows were sent across the nightmarishly scarred waste of the no-man's land between the trenches to scope out the enemy trench and secure it if possible. Many seemed to hope that Lawrence would
sounds like a suicide mission. Trench warfare did not work like that.
have the opportunity to prove his devotion to his country by making the ultimate sacrifice for it. It was while he was gone that someone started asking questions. Nobody remembered him ever talking of home. No sweet-smelling letters came, no soggy, dirt-streaked letters left. Questions started to float among even the higher levels of the command. Nobody was able to actually find his station orders. He'd come in with a squad of reinforcements transferred from France, but there was no paperwork. The rest of the reinforcement squad had never seen the man before he'd been lumped in with them the night before the trip, along with the snips and scraps of other squads decimated by the Germans. Whispers filtered among the grunts of the corporal being a curse. Nearly every man who'd shared a bunkhouse with him had gotten trench foot, and the rooms he haunted always seemed to smell more musty and sickly sweet,
Ew.
even for the trench.
Ew. Are you so musty, bro? Everybody smelled musty afterwards? Damn.
The men sent over the no man's land with Corporal Lawrence heard and cared for none of this. Just another man among many, all with death certificates awaiting a stamp that could fall at any moment. They moved fast and low, from crater to crater, slipping over slick mud and barbed wire, the only thing that seemed to grow in that blasted waste. Charging the last spur and into the trench, they were greeted not with the harsh bark of German orders and rifles, but a dense, close silence. Preparing for ambush, the men started to filter out into the tunnels and halls of the trench. The men, already nervous, were not calmed by their investigation. The trenches stank of mold, sweat, and a thin undercurrent of rotten fruit. A vile, cloying slime seemed to have pooled in every divot and crack.
Oh, was that same kind of slime stuff that went over with the dimension hopper? Is that the same thing or what?
Sticky as glue and itchy on the flesh. Private Dixon found the first body and managed to cry out before vomiting. They knew it had been a man only because nothing else of that size could have been there. It lay on the floor of a barracks. The entire floor.
Damn.
The flesh of it had been smeared somehow, spread like butter over the rough dirt floor.
Oh. The thought of somebody's skin spreading like butter is very unsettling for me.
Bones, already looking pitted and rotten, stuck out at random angles, like dead trees in a still swamp. The skull rested on one of the highest bunks, facing the doorway. More remains were found, each seemingly more unsettling and strange than the last. Unfathomable horrors were discovered one after the next, sending men retching and running from the trench. Corporal Lawrence was the first to find the hole. It was small, no more than 4 feet across. It seemed to be the accidental uncovering of a natural chamber, the empty blackness of it defying investigation.
Like from Tremors, from the sci-fi movie Tremors.
Private Dixon, recovered and blessedly numb from his previous ordeals, saw the corporal prod the edge with his boot, then crouch to peer in, then suddenly slide in head first before the private could so much as utter a shout of question. When questioned later, he could provide little illumination as to what happened over the 2 minutes Corporal Lawrence spent in the hole. He could see nothing. The light of a torch seemingly gobbled up a few feet into that dense blackness. There were sounds, the rustle of movement over loose stone or rubble, an odd liquid shifting, a dry rustle that made him think of insect husks.
Okay.
As he shouted for aid, there was a sudden upwelling of a repulsive stench, and his fellow soldiers found him retching helplessly beside the hole when they came around the turn.
Oh, man.
It was as they rushed to Private Dixon's aid that the hand emerged from the hole. They stopped and raised rifles as one body, roaring for the owner of that pale, trembling hand to identify himself. As they watched, another hand joined the first, followed by the pale, shivering head of Corporal Lawrence.
Yeah.
He was streaked and smeared with a tarry black ooze, hacking and coughing thinly as he hauled his body up beside that of the gasping private. As they moved to help the man, the corporal vomited up a heavy stream of the same repulsive slime that coated his body in smears and globs. They were hesitant to touch him, finally doing so after the seemingly endless river of grime stopped pouring from him.
Oh my.
He was insensible, eyes rolling and wide, body as limp as a boned fish. The men fled the trench with all the speed they could muster.
But they didn't leave him behind, which is good, but I can clearly see where this is going poorly. God damn it.
The corporal, they ran with no thought of cover or death, only escape. They crossed in record time, falling into their home trench, gasping and shivering. One man, known to have bludgeoned a German to death with a brick, curled on the floor in a sobbing heap.
Bludgeoning someone to death with a brick is nothing like seeing their skin being spread like butter. Like butter. I can't believe it's not butter.
Moved quickly, isolating the men and trying to calm the most lucid for a report. What spilled out would have been immediately dismissed as lies and hallucination were it not for the earnest, pleading stares of those reporting. Command calmed them with explanations of battle fatigue and strange gas weapon tests, and shared silent, focused stares as the cowed men were ushered out. Corporal Lawrence had little to report. Of his time in the hole, he could or would say little. He stated that he had slipped and fallen into what may have been some long-blocked underground pool or perhaps a buried latrine. Of the sounds and smells reported by the private, he had nothing to say, only that he had struggled a short time, then managed to get back out just as the men arrived. Truly, he seemed none the worse for wear. In fact, he seemed in better spirits than many had remembered ever seeing him, favoring the commanders with a wide, giddy smile as he was dismissed with a warning not to discuss the events. Not one man from that trench survived the Great War, although few died in battle. A wave of sickness took the trench a few days after Private Dixon's death. It seemed to eat the flesh like acid, men waking to find previously healthy flesh eaten down to the bone, oozing and blackened. Corporal Lawrence was remanded to a French mental ward, transferred after several complaints from the hospital proper where he was first sent. It seemed his behavior hinted at a growing mental imbalance. The corporal would rant quietly to the other patients, whispers about endless halls, pursuits in the dark, flesh laid out like pages of a book. It was dismissed as war fatigue. He vanished several times from the ward, only to appear several hours later as if nothing had happened. When pressed, he would begin to sing "My Bonnie Lies Over the Sea" in an endless monotone until the doctors left exasperated. A stale, musty foulness seemed to sit in the air wherever he stayed, and incidents of infection and the strange consuming sickness that had beset his home trench seemed to follow him like a cloud. Numerous attempts were made to transfer the man, only to be met with bureaucratic confusion. No records were found of the man, no entry papers, commendations, or incidents, not even a birth certificate. Through it all, he sat for hours on end, cross-legged on his bed, occasionally humming tunelessly or rambling off the names of his wardmates between short, bubbling giggles. Corporal Lawrence and 18 men vanished one November night between a 5-minute nurse rotation at 3 in the morning. The room reeked of rust, oil, mold, and sweet rot. Thick black swaths of crumbling ooze coated the beds and several of the walls.
Yeah, this sounds like that mold that they were talking about before.
Wide patches of it smearing and eating into the floor. Of the men, there was no sign at first. As they searched, one nurse shifted a bed aside only to shriek and nearly trip across one of the sunken, reeking depressions on the floor. In a tight, perfect spiral were what appeared to be hundreds of teeth resting neatly on the floor. After counting, they accounted for the total of all the teeth of every living soul in that ward, but one. The corporal was never found, nor were the men. The incident was swallowed by the constant barrage of horrors from the front and forgotten with ease. Still they came. Stories of strange deaths, of disappearing men, found days later alive but broken and twisted beyond comprehension.
God damn.
Stories of a strange, dark figures stalking the bomb-riddled towns of Europe.
That's got to be the same smiling man from the Dimension Hopper. It's gotta be. Right? That was freaky. Like, that was actually mad like, I hate when I watch stuff like this where I can't really talk and like commentate like in the middle of the video, so I'm sure you guys really love that. Imagine being so socially awkward you get classified as SCP. So SCP-106 then, an elderly man. So when it said the young man, this is an animation of what is later to become the old man, SCP-106. Who's SCP-106? It's got to be the old man, right?
The old man, right?
Yeah. So this one, the animated one, was about the origin, the young man. I get that now.
Yeah.
That's really good. That was freaky, dude. Come take a seat. That was freaky.
I was about to fight you.
I'm about to fight you back.
You used all of the creamer for your coffee.
I made 2 cups, fool.
Oh.
Oh, you didn't know that?
No.
I told you I was going to make us some coffee before. The next one we're going to do is SCP-096. That's going on the main channel. Skitten will probably join me for it then. And then I'll have her shoot one for her channel too, because why not? Thank you guys for coming by, and I'll see y'all. Peace.